So we have Kant's moral theory, the big C categorical imperative, the process to determine duties, to tell us which actions fall under the big C categorical imperative. We have our explanation of treating people as ends in themselves, and we have the notion that the morally worthy action is the one done from the motivation of duty. And all of that sounds keen, right? But there are some conflicts for Kant. There are some problems that we need to talk about. The first problem, I'm going to tell you a story. Consider that you are living in 1940 Germany. Okay, so this is Nazi Germany. You are not a Jew, but your neighbors are. And you like your neighbors a lot, okay? You've lived next to your neighbors for years upon years. Your children have grown up together. They've played together. And everything's been just great. Well, your neighbors, are getting ready to get hauled off to the concentration camp because they're Jews. And you just can't bear to see it. So you allow them to hide in your attic. One day, a Nazi soldier comes knocking on your door. We're searching for your neighbors. Do you know where your neighbors are? Do you have any Jews hiding in this house? What do? On the one hand, Kant says you cannot lie. Okay? It is your duty to tell the truth. Okay? Think about it. The maxim, I should lie. Universalized maxim, everyone should lie. Can I will this to be universal law? Absolutely not. Duty, do not lie. So, on the one hand, you're not supposed to lie to the Nazi soldier. But on the other hand, it seems like you ought to help preserve life, since almost certainly the Jews in the attic are going to end up in the concentration camp in the gas chamber. Now, preserving life seems like something we ought to do as well, okay? So think about the process. Maxim, I should preserve life. Universalized maxim, everyone should preserve life. Can I will that to be a universal law? Yeah, seems like I can. Duty, preserve life. Well, handing over the Jews means telling the truth, but almost certain death. Lying preserves life, but it violates that duty to tell the truth. What do? Remember, Kant doesn't have a hierarchy of moral duties. They all fall under that all-encompassing big C categorical imperative. So the Nazi at the door objection says we have to either lie or sacrifice someone's life. But this doesn't seem quite right. This is what we call conflicting duties, okay? Kant can't account for this, okay? Conflicting duties. We have duties that both fall under the big C categorical imperative. We ought to do both, but we can't. This is a common problem with any form of moral absolutism, because moral absolutism says rules cannot have exceptions. We discussed this with rule utilitarianism too, if you recall. Rules cannot have exceptions. There are no exceptions. You must do this all the time. But when I have two conflicting duties that I must do all the time and I can't do both, I'm in a bind. And Kant can't quite account for this. Now, for what it's worth, Kant was presented with a similar objection. Kant was 18th century. There were no Nazis in 18th century, but somebody said, look, Kant, what if, somebody comes up to you and says, somebody's trying to kill me. I'm running into that house. Hide me, hide me. And then the would-be axe murderer comes up to you, and you know this because he's large and bloody and he has an axe, and he says, have you seen this guy? I need to chop him up into little bits. Well, you know that he's gone into that house. and you want to lie, but Kant says you're not supposed to lie. And Kant says you absolutely positively should tell him where the guy went. Tell him he went into that house over there. Now, Kant's reasoning is that if you tell him where he went, it could be that the guy snuck out the back of the house and he's making his way across a field or something behind the house. If you lie to the guy, he might cut between the houses, catch the guy in the field that much quicker. Whereas if you sent him to the house, he'd still be searching the house while the guy's getting away across the field. That's Kant's explanation. He also says you're not killing the guy. The axe murderer is killing the guy. Your duty is to not lie. Now, the Nazi at the door objection seems a little more compelling. It's a little more troublesome, but that's the line of thought. There's another objection. And this is, ironically, also a Nazi objection. Kant, who was German, but didn't know, like I said, didn't have Nazis. Nazis just tend to make for good objections to Kant's moral theory. The fanatical Nazi objection. Imagine a Nazi who's so incredibly dedicated to killing Jews, who's so convinced that the ideal society will only be achieved if there are absolutely no Jews, that he would want everyone to kill Jews even if he himself is a Jew. Okay? The fanatical Nazi says, we should kill all Jews. Everyone should kill all Jews. I should kill all Jews. Okay? He's Jewish. He thinks somebody should kill him. He should kill other Jews, and then somebody should kill him because his existence will impede the ideal society. This is clearly a bad maxim, right? I should kill all Jews is a bad maxim. But the fanatic can, in fact, will that to be universal law. And this is problematic. Kant offers up absolutely no criteria for good maxims. He simply can't account for this. He offers no criteria for what makes a maxim a good maxim. The fanatical Nazi wants to kill all the Jews, okay. If he can go through the thought process, it would seem then he comes up with the duty, kill the Jews. Now, Kant doesn't have to buy into this objection. For one thing, fanatical Nazi, sort of by definition of being fanatical, he's being irrational. So Kant would probably want to claim something like he's not using his reason, his faculty of reason correctly. He is, by definition, irrational. But there's another thing, because the fanatical Nazi is using the death of the Jews to reach an end, the ideal society. In other words, the fanatical Nazi is using the Jews solely as a means to an end. If he was treating them as ends in themselves, he would know he's not supposed to kill them. So while there is nothing offered by Kant for what makes a good maxim, if you combine the process to determine duties with this notion of how we're supposed to treat other people as ends in themselves, never solely as a means, then it would seem as though the fanatical Nazi could not, in fact, successfully follow the process to determine duties to the conclusion that we should kill all the Jews. Whether you find either of Kant's responses to these objections plausible is, of course, up to you.